Hello everyone, I'm your teacher for the day, Saira Raza, and today we are doing this topic, Indigo, by Louis Fisher. It is indeed a pleasant coincidence that today is 2nd October, Gandhi Jayanti, and the chapter talks about the achievements of the Mahatma. I take this interaction with you students and this lecture of mine today as a humble tribute and a Shraddhanjali to this great leader, the father of a nation, affectionately called Bapu. Before getting to the chapter, students, let's have a short introduction about the author Louis Fisher. Louis Fisher was born in the year 1896 and he left for his heavenly abode in the year 1970. He is perhaps the finest writer regarding the life of his biography. Life of Mahatma was a huge success, and perhaps it is the most accurate penned down details about the Mahatma. Louis Fisher was a well-known journalist and he wrote for the New York Times, and it is said that he spent a large portion of his lifetime in the subcontinent and was enamored by Bapu, and he followed Bapu all over the place and he penned down the details and the accurate details, if I might say, about the life of Mahatma Gandhi. The chapter deals about the indigo problem in the district of Champaran, and there are many other districts where the peasants were also suffering from these rules and regulations regarding the indigo plantation. And what was the grievance of the farmers of Champaran? Students, you need to know that before the synthetic dye came up, and the factories were already installed in the colonial side of the world, the cotton was taken from the colonies like India and Africa, and the plantation indigo required the humid climate and it needed a certain kind of black soil, a kind of soil which was available in the subcontinent. And so why was this indigo plant so important? Because it was the only dye available at that time. Now what did the British rulers do, the landlords who wanted this dye? So they were working on these two kind of, should I say, rules. One was the teen katai and the other thing was the kurki system, of which meant that they would mortgage the land of the agricultural country of the subcontinent, the poor villagers. Their land was mortgaged and they were pushed into growing indigo plantation. Now in the Teen Katia system, 15% of land, whatever was the size of the land, 15%, which amounts to about teen katia, and it's a term. It's a term of measurement in Bengal and Bihar, in those sites, and that amounts to 15% of the land. They had to grow indigo, whether they liked it or not, and give it as rent to the British landlords. Now suddenly the news of the synthetic dye spread, that in Germany invented the synthetic dye, and now the people who had these huge factories, the fabric factories, and were producing cloth, they realized that getting this indigo dye all the way from the subcontinent to the continent was hugely expensive, and it was much cheaper to take in use the synthetic dye. And when they got to know this, unfortunately, the illiterate masses of the country, the simple villagers who worked and toiled day in, day out, were not aware of this invention, and they suddenly did not know that why the landlords came to them. And the landlords came to them and said, now we are going to break this contract with you. You don't have to grow this indigo, which was already hugely irksome, children, for the farmers. They were wondering, why do they have to give this rent? And maybe they want to plant something else which is more profitable and beneficial for them. So they were quite comfortable to sign off and say, okay, we do away with the contract. Now, because they were not literate, you see, they could be taken for a ride. And the smart landlords, what did they do? They asked them to give a certain amount of compensation for the breaking of the contract, which is very unethical. Children, now if you and I had a contract and I broke the contract, legally, I'm the one who is supposed to give you some compensation. It was working the other way around for these poor farmers, and they were pushed into giving this compensation because they were illiterate, because they were not educated. They knew no better, and they were exploited. Many of them signed willingly. They wanted to get rid of this system whereby they had to keep giving this 15% to the landlords. Some of them hired, who could afford, hired legal advice from the people, had to pay heavily, and the others who refused to give or do agree to this idea were beaten by the thugs. So the whole situation was quite painful for the villagers. And then there was this one villager, Rajkumar Shukla, who did not understand what was happening. He knew for generations his people in Champaran were working hard day in and day out, and yet they were the victims of abject poverty. They neither had clothes, neither did they have food, and they were suffering. He could not understand, but he heard somewhere that this man, Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi, had come to India. From somewhere he had heard this, and he had this faith, this internal faith that this man is going to do something for me. Now, Rajkumar Shukla took this bold step, and what you need to understand, children, this is before 1918, when there was no form of transportation, no good form of transportation. And can you imagine this farmer? He has been termed as the resolute farmer. On the basis of his faith, he traveled all the way. He pursued the Mahatma. Rajkumar Shukla went from one point to another with his limited finances. He must have traveled through the hard terrain of Champaran and the entire nation, bought train tickets with the little money he must have had, all because of his faith. His driving factor was his faith, his belief that this one man is going to do something for us. And he pursued Gandhiji all the way. He went to Ahmedabad, to the ashram. He met him in Kanpur. Wherever Gandhiji would be, he would see, when he would come out, he would see this resolute farmer sitting on his haunches, staring at him, waiting for an appointment with this man who he believed would end the pain and suffering of his community, his backward agrarian community. And eventually Gandhiji consented and said, okay, I'm going to come with you. And so when you read the chapter, students, the entire Champaran, the victory of the first act of civil disobedience, it would have never ever happened if Rajkumar Shukla, this resolute farmer, had not pushed Mahatma Gandhi to a point of not being able to say no. Gandhiji had to agree because this man was pursuing him all over the place and saying, please you come. And please understand, children, that I am teaching this chapter to you as a teacher of literature. It is based on historical facts, but what you need to see, I want you to see, is how applicable is Mahatma Gandhi's modus operandi. The way Gandhiji operated, he is so different from any political leader any time. Since independence, we have had leaders, we have had different form of governments, but it is always with a political agenda that they come into politics and they try to live up to the manifesto and do whatever they have to do. Gandhiji, please understand students, it's very important. Gandhiji's only single most important driving force was his compassion for human beings, his empathy for the people. It was never with a premeditated plan. Gandhiji did not go to Champaran to make a political statement, even though we are aware that when he was in South Africa, he himself had worked towards liberating the people's mind there and getting them out from the clutches of apartheid. But he did not come to India and he did not come to Champaran to create a political platform for him. He came at the behest of this one man and he followed him only to see how well can he help him in a situation like this. And now talking about Champaran, so you understand the grievances of the sharecroppers. Why were they so unhappy? Because they did not understand that now the contract is broken, again they're giving money, something was wrong. Rajkumar Shukla could not pinpoint what was wrong, but he knew that there was something wrong, something was amiss. And he had this faith that this man is going to come and help me. Now coming, students, to Gandhiji's movement towards the Champaran district. This was the time of the colonial rule. The people's minds were gripped with fear. Very few people took a stand against the rule of the Britishers for the fear of being tormented, punished and pushed into the jail and never being able to come out. But there were few individuals, and these are the people with courage who eventually liberated our motherland. And one of them was Professor Malkani, who was a government school teacher, and this professor was so dedicated to the freedom of the country that he dared to welcome Gandhiji publicly and even housed him for 2 days when Gandhiji was going with Rajkumar Shukla towards Champaran. And I also want to bring a point at this to your mind at this juncture, is that when Gandhiji was initially on his way to Champaran, was even had to visit Dr. Rajendra Prasad, and who later on became the President of India, that the people, the servants in Rajendra Prasad's home, did not allow Gandhiji to draw water from the well. How sad was that? And they thought because Gandhiji was accompanying Rajkumar Shukla that he was also an untouchable. Bapu believed that freedom from the foreign rule was a matter, yes, of great concern, but what the Indians needed to do was to liberate their minds from these kind of superstitions, these kinds of belief, and this kind of discriminations and prejudices, which unfortunately, even post 70 odd years of our independence, we still haven't achieved. And so I say with a heavy heart that Gandhiji would be pretty dismayed today if he saw the way things are turning, the kind of prejudices we have, the kind we studied in the chapter the other day. We have read about the Dalits, we've read about the discriminations against the girl child, and all this the Mahatma Gandhi was very much averse to. Now coming to Champaran, this is the place where Gandhiji came. I am repeating again and again, it's almost like a refrain, children, that the driving force was empathy and compassion. Gandhiji wanted to extend a hand of compassion and gesture of kindness to this man who seemed very disturbed, because this man had faith, and Gandhiji goes to Champaran, and this is where Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi becomes the Mahatma. And please understand that he did not go, he was not, his politics was related to the day-to-day problems of the people. His politics was not that of abstraction. that we are going to do this and we are going to become a superpower and we are going to have the brilliant factories, we are going to produce so much, and in the year 2021, 2024, we are going to reach this level. Gandhiji's politics was not a politics of abstraction. His concern was always to elevate the downtrodden, the suffering masses of the country from their distress, and to show them some hope, to make them self-reliant. And how was he going to make them self-reliant? Would he be able to make them self-reliant by just rushing to Champaran and coming back like most of the people do today? No. Gandhiji would go to a place, and this is how he went to Champaran. And the moment Bapu would go to a place, all his followers would follow. They were the lawyers who would follow him. His family would follow him. There was British Babu, his wife Kasturbai, Mazharul Haq, and they were all kind of Rajendra Prasad and Professor Kriplani, Malkhani. All these people would follow him. And please understand, children, that Gandhiji did not touch and go. Even his stay exceeded a year in Champaran. Once he visited a place, he was there. He was there to stay on and to bring the matter to a conclusion. Now, moving ahead in the chapter, you will see that how Gandhiji's modus operandi worked at different levels. If he would never ever believe in just creating theatrical acts. He was not a man who was trying to excite the emotions of the illiterate people and take them to a direction which he thought was correct. Gandhiji went, and what did he first start doing? He started going into the details of this indigo issue. People could come to him and speak to him about the atrocities, the grievances. He started collecting facts. Please understand, students, Mahatma Gandhi was himself legally qualified in the British law itself. He was a barrister. He understood the pulse of the colonial rulers. He understood the law as much, if not better, than the Britishers, and he was going to challenge them on this very law. And this is what he started. So he started accumulating a lot of facts, and then he spoke to the lawyers and he said that, and he told the lawyers that you're charging these poor people these fees. This does not help. This kind of fee that you're taking, this kind of escalated fee is not going to help them. What needs to be done is that you need to liberate them. We need to do something to extract their minds from this fear which has gripped them so totally. And what did Gandhiji do then? Gandhiji told them that taking these cases to the court does not help, because firstly, the people who are going to pass the judgment are going to be British, with people with British loyalties, if not the Britishers themselves. And secondly, these people have nothing. And why are we charging them? And cases in court, children, even today, you get to the court and it's a never-ending story. And the poor farmers had barely nothing. Where would they give the hefty fee, which was a demand of the lawyers? And look at his mode of working, children. His life was so exemplary that people looking at him felt embarrassed and said that this man, they thought, this man has come from another state, and he has come to help the people who are supposed to be our clients. Should not we be doing something for them? And by his gesture, Gandhiji actually transformed the mindset of these lawyers who were till then taking a lot of fee, and these people were being torn between the 2 points. They didn't know what to do, how to resolve the matter. Now, while he was in Champaran, so on the one hand, you had his wife interacting with the ladies, and what was she doing? She was giving them lessons on personal hygiene, and it was so sad that one lady told her that you talk about we don't even have a box to keep our clothes. And there was another lady, a poor farmer. She said, you know, I have only one sari, so you're talking about washing and personal hygiene. What do I wear? This was the kind of poverty. And these people had been toiling for decades and generations. And these people had nothing. And when Gandhiji came, and I was getting to the point to you children, Mahatma Gandhi never did anything theatrical. He was not there to make a moment's presentation and become a great leader. His driving force was always truth, goodness, and compassion for his fellow human beings. And Gandhiji, on the one hand, when his wife was educating the women about the personal hygiene, there were teachers, his own son and other teachers, who started educating the village people and educating them about what? About their basic rights, how to sign, and not to blindly sign on things, because Gandhiji had realized that in this game they had been cheated, because the compensation should have been given to these villagers and not vice versa. So Gandhiji wanted them to know their own laws and realize that this is their nation, this is their country, and they should not be pushed around. And finally, on the legal side, these cases were being sorted out, and certainly the governance in Champaran got very wary of this Mahatma, because they realized, here's a man who knows the law, and here's a man who is championing the cause of these villagers. And then another incident took place, children. One day, Gandhiji heard that in the neighboring village, Motihari, there was another villager who was badly and brutally beaten, ruthlessly beaten. This is the kind of experience which these farmers had faced for years, and that is why their minds were totally gripped with fear. And Gandhiji realized that he wanted to go and see this man, and on his way, suddenly this person comes, and he was asked to stop his carriage, and Gandhiji was told that the instructions that he could not go any further. Gandhiji was asked to go back home, and he had to sign on a farman which came from the district magistrate, and he was asked to not move anywhere around. And what was his fault? His fault was, according to them, as you can see in this image, this is an image of the farman signed by Mr. Haycock, and he was asked not to go. Gandhiji never defaulted where law was concerned. He was not for breaking the laws of a country, but the only time he would do something otherwise, when the law of the country was juxtaposed with the law of God Almighty, the law of human goodness, that Gandhiji had to take a call on the matter. So Gandhiji signed on that farman, and that is when he signed, but he said that I am not going to leave. Gandhiji, it was at that moment, unknowingly, he stepped into one of the greatest movements in the history of the subcontinent, and that was the first act of civil disobedience. And Gandhiji signed, and he realized, he writes, in fact, the author writes, Fisher has written that Gandhiji said that it was then I realized that no one has a right to tell me where to move around in my own country and whom to meet. I am in my own country. How can someone from another country come and dictate terms to me? And why should I be listening to their terms? So unknowingly, it was not a premeditated act. Please understand, he was again going to Motihari out of compassion, and he signed on this farman, and this became the first act of civil disobedience. And then this act spread like wildfire, and we know that how it spread all over the country, and eventually it was responsible for giving India its independence. Now, coming to the question which is frequently in our minds, that can then the success of the Champaran agitation be attributed to one man, the Mahatma? Obviously, the answer is no. If Rajkumar Shukla if Rajkumar Shukla had not gone to Gandhiji, Gandhiji perhaps had actually, he mentions that he did not even know where was this Champaran. Would you and I go, children? We are not even, despite the easy way of commuting today, it's so much easier for us to travel today. Would we go at the behest of a farmer, an illiterate farmer? Well, Gandhiji did. And when Gandhiji went to Champaran and this incident took place, the kind of human support he had. So because he did not agree to go back and leave Champaran, Gandhiji was obviously taken to the prison. And when in prison, Gandhiji, when he went, there were thousands of people there. And in fact, it's beautifully mentioned in the chapter. The ground around the place where Gandhiji was being taken into the jail was black with human support. All the Adivasis, poor farmers, weak, old, young, women, men, all of them came all the way around to show this one man who they learnt had stood up for them, had wanted to speak for them, and it was this man who had made them realize that you had been cheated, and technically the Britishers need to apologize or give you your compensation back. So this human support is also a very valid point in terms of the success of the Champaran agitation. And of course, you see the images of Dr. Rajendra Prasad, there is Mazrul Haq, there's Brij Kishore Babu, his own family, his wife Kasturbai, and his own son, and Gandhiji had a great support from all these people. So the success of the agitation, this faith that everyone had, and then Gandhiji messaged quickly to the lawyers, and then all these people came, some of the important lawyers who eventually held very, very important position when India achieved its independence in 1947. And Gandhiji said, so I'm being taken in, and what is your plan? And these people said that they would hold the front when Bapu was going to be imprisoned. Now seeing the human support, the British regime, the authorities got worried because they knew they had a man who had realized that they had been abusing the rights of these residents of the district, and quickly they wanted to strike a deal with Gandhiji and said, Gandhiji said, you have to give me the compensation back. I'm okay to go to the prison. Why was he okay to go to the prison? Because firstly, he was fearless, and secondly, this message, when Gandhiji knew he was going to the prison, he had sent telegram to the higher authorities in Delhi and to the people who were responsible for controlling the bureaucratic rule of the smaller districts. He had messaged to the people whose support he wanted, and he was willing to stay in the jail. And quickly, it is then that the British started striking a deal with Gandhiji and said, okay, let's talk it out. And so what do you want? And he said, I want compensation. They said, how much? Gandhiji said, 50% of the compensation you must give us back, because you are at wrong, you broke the contract. The fault was not of these poor farmers. And then these people were conniving and very shrewd, and they thought that Mahatma Gandhi there would be a deadlock of talks, because he'll be adamant, he will refuse to budge from that 50% of the compensation. But Gandhiji did not want a deadlock, and Gandhiji said, so how much are you going to give me? They said, we'll only give you 25, hoping that they could say that we offered them the compensation, but they did not take back. But Gandhiji was smart, and he said, okay. Now you'll ask me a question, students, why did he settle for 25%? Because it was not a monetary issue. It was not a matter of getting the money back. That was partly it, because these people were poor. But what was more important, that even if the Britishers had given 10% of the compensation back, Gandhiji would have got a chunk of British pride. And that is what he wanted to do. And so Gandhiji accepted that 25%, broke the deadlocks. Now what did this do? This victory made an average Indian who till now was abused and beaten and tormented and exploited realize that there is a law, and he realized that they cannot be pushed around, and that they had finally found a leader. They had finally found someone who spoke up for them, and this made them self-reliant. And Mahatma Gandhi's then coming to his Satyagraha, Gandhiji believed that people should be self-reliant. In fact, he was the first one. He was the first man who believed that the Indian villages, the villages were little areas which should be self-reliant totally in terms of economic requirements, in terms of education, medical, whatever, they should be. He was the one. So his Satyagraha meant that there should be more power from each, and all these villages had their own positive facts. So he promoted handloom, he promoted he promoted sericulture, he wanted small-scale industries, he wanted the villages to be economically complete within themselves. Gandhiji's Satyagraha is very important, children. If you can see Gandhiji's Satyagraha, the points to keep in mind about his Satyagraha is that what does Satyagraha mean? It is the fight for the truth, his Satyagraha, achievement of the truth. And how was Gandhiji going to achieve the truth? He was going to achieve the truth, reach the truth through the path of ahimsa. For Gandhiji, ahimsa and truth were so intertwined that they could not be separated. They were almost like two sides of a coin. So on one side you had ahimsa, that was the path to be taken to reach the truth. And of self-reliance was taking the people to a different paradigm. He taught them not only how to sign, to understand about personal hygiene, and he also believed that apart from all these things where the villages would promote their own sericulture, handloom, whatever, he also believed that the minds, we could only be truly liberated if our minds were extricated of the superstitions which had gripped us. He was averse to untouchability. He called those people Harijan to give them respect and a status in society. Gandhiji also believed in the women having active role not only in politics or in politics in terms of for the development of the cities. He was against any kind of discrimination reflected towards the girl child. And now I'd like to say that even the Swachh Bharat campaign, which has become hugely popular all over the country, it was initially initiated by the Mahatma, none other than Bapu himself. He was sitting in Champaran, and it's noted that Bapu would write letters and take accounts of the ashram all the way in Ahmedabad, and also he would write to them reminding them that the toilet trenches had to be covered up and new trenches had to be dug. So this Swachh Bharat, this kind of Make in India, all these policies were initially initiated by none other than the father of the nation, even back in 1945, 46, and eventually, of course, 47. Gandhiji did not discriminate. He was truly a Mahatma. Now moving on to the chapter, there is and a few lines attributed to this one man. And of course, children, if you do get a chance, please see the movie Gandhi, Richard Attenborough's Gandhi, which won so many Oscar awards, a brilliant movie. And even in that movie, you will see that how there is this journalist, this priest, who was supporting him and writing about Gandhiji, and Charles Andrews. And Charles Andrews followed Gandhiji, and he comes to the prison and he spoke to Gandhiji and said that he wanted to be part of this movement because the news spread around like wildfire that matters. Suddenly, India was victorious against the Britishers after the Champaran agitation, the resolving the compensation matter, and he wanted to help Gandhiji. And the people, all the supporters of Gandhiji, were very keen that Charles Andrews should be part of their movement because it would bring the attention. And it was then that Gandhiji, very unlike anyone else, said in a very simple, humble way, he told Charlie that, thank you, Charlie, and I think you should move on to Fiji or wherever you were supposed to be going. And he told the people that if you think that putting a white man as a prop for a fight which is already not an equal fight, the Indians fight against the colonial rulers. I mean, it was said the sun never set in the British Empire. It has spread all over the world. And he said, if you think by putting a white man there as a prop would make your cause stronger and make it more honest, then you're mistaken, because you should have faith in your heart that what you are fighting for is the truth. And you are going to go through the path of ahimsa, non-violence, and you will win because what you are fighting for is truth. And it was this time that he said, no, we will not have this man, even though he was extremely fond of Charles. But he said, our fight should be our own, and we should not drag others and foreigners in the fight. Now, in conclusion to the chapter, we realize that Gandhiji was a man of great strength, a leader who cannot be compared, and he's given this huge weapon to the entire mankind of not taking injustice. Okay, Gandhiji did not believe that you should not speak up, but he believed no matter whatever is your fight for, the method should always be non-violent. You should follow ahimsa. And with this, I conclude my lecture, children. This is not a topic that we can conclude in a short span of time. Gandhiji is a man of a gigantic status, and I have taken this Herculean task upon my shoulders to actually talk about this great man. I am a humble teacher and not in a position to give my comments on someone so great who has shown the world, and he is still today rated as one of the finest international leaders of any time. Thank you for your attention.